Montana Territory, 1873. The unforgiving plains stretched before Daniel Sutton like a golden sea, wind rippling through waist-high grasses that seemed to touch the horizon. At 26, he'd spent 8 years riding for various outfits, his youth fading into calloused hands and weathered skin despite his young age. The cattle drives, the bunkhouses, the constant movement, they had been his only companions. And that was exactly how he wanted it. A man who stays put gets buried. His father had told him before dying of fever in their Kansas homestead when Daniel was 17. His mother followed 6 months later, leaving him alone with a truth he carried like scripture. Attachment meant vulnerability, and vulnerability got you killed on the frontier. Daniel adjusted his hat against the autumn sun, squinting at the crude map in his gloved hands. 2 weeks of hard riding had brought him here, to property he now owned but had never laid eyes upon. 500 acres purchased from a land office in Cheyenne after a particularly profitable cattle drive. The agent had painted a picture of fertile grazing land with a small cabin already built, perfect for a man looking to run his own spread. "This is it," he muttered to his chestnut gelding. "No more taking orders, no more moving on. Just me and whatever I can build." The notion of permanence felt foreign in his mouth, like speaking a language he barely understood. His life had been defined by impermanence, sleeping under different stars, following different trails, serving different ranchers. Owning land seemed the antidote to the restlessness that had pursued him since his parents' deaths. Yet even as he gazed at his property, he couldn't quite silence the voice warning him that roots were dangerous things, easily torn from unforgiving soil. Daniel folded the map and nudged his horse forward. The trail wound through a copse of cottonwoods before opening onto a wide valley. As he crested the final rise, the land unfurled before him. Rolling grassland dotted with wildflowers, a creek cutting through the center, and in the distance, the unmistakable shape of a cabin. Smoke curled from the chimney. Daniel reined his horse to a stop, a frown creasing his forehead. The land agent had mentioned a cabin, yes, but nothing about occupants. He reached for the Winchester rifle in his saddle scabbard, not drawing it, but keeping his hand close as he approached. The cabin came into clearer view, sturdy logs, a small corral to one side holding 2 horses, and a chicken coop from which several hens pecked at the earth. A garden plot showed signs of recent harvest, and laundry flapped on a line. This was no temporary camp of squatters or trappers passing through. Someone had made a home here, on his land. As Daniel approached, the cabin door swung open. A woman stepped out, one hand shielding her eyes against the sun, the other clutching a shotgun pointed loosely at the ground. Behind her skirts peeked 2 small faces, a boy no older than 6 and a girl perhaps 4 years of age. "That is far enough, stranger," the woman called, her voice clear and steady despite the tension evident in her posture. Daniel raised both hands slowly, palms forward. "Ma'am, I mean no harm." He kept his distance, noting how she shifted the shotgun slightly at his approach. "I am just a bit confused about finding folks here." The woman did not lower her weapon. She was young, no more than 22 or 23, with golden blonde hair tied back in a practical braid. Her dress was simple calico, faded blue with tiny white flowers, patched in several places, but clean. Despite the wariness in her eyes, there was a striking beauty to her features that caught Daniel off guard. "This is Whitetree property," she said firmly. "My husband staked this claim 3 years ago." Daniel frowned. "Ma'am, I purchased this land 2 months ago from the Territorial Land Office. I have the deed right here." He reached slowly toward his saddlebag. "Do not move." The shotgun came up. The children behind her ducked further behind her skirts. "Mama," the little boy whispered. "Go inside, Thomas," she said without taking her eyes off Daniel. "Take your sister." Daniel remained still, his hands raised again. "My name is Daniel Sutton. I bought this land legal and proper from the Cheyenne Land Office. I have papers to prove it." The woman's expression faltered slightly. "That cannot be. My husband, James Whitetree, filed claim in 70. We have been working this land for 3 years. May I step down from my horse, ma'am, so we can talk about this proper?" After a moment of consideration, she nodded, though the shotgun remained ready. "Slowly, and keep your hands where I can see them." Daniel dismounted carefully, keeping his movements deliberate and non-threatening. "I do not know what happened with your husband's claim, but I have a deed signed by the territorial governor himself. My husband died last winter, she said flatly. Pneumonia. The words hung in the air between them. Daniel removed his hat, a reflexive gesture of respect that seemed to soften her stance slightly. I am truly sorry to hear that, Mrs. Whitetree. Zara, she corrected. Zara Whitetree. Mrs. Whitetree, Daniel continued. I do not know what happened with your claim, but there has been some kind of mistake. I paid good money for this land. A flicker of something, fear, perhaps, crossed her face before her expression hardened again. There is no mistake on our part. We have the original claim documents inside. James registered our homestead properly. Daniel noticed the slight tremble in her hands despite her brave front. The reality of her situation began to dawn on him. A young widow with 2 small children, alone on the frontier, now facing a stranger claiming ownership of her home. Perhaps we should both look at our papers, he suggested gently. There must be an explanation. The tension between them was interrupted by a small voice. Mama, I am hungry. The little girl had crept back to the doorway, thumb in her mouth, dark curls framing a face that looked remarkably like her mother's. Zara's composure wavered. Go back inside, Elizabeth. I will be there soon. Daniel lowered his hand slowly. Mrs. Whitetree, night will be falling soon. I have been riding since dawn. I give you my word as a gentleman that I intend no harm to you or your children. May I water my horse while we figure this out? Something in his tone, or perhaps the genuine confusion evident in his expression, caused her to lower the shotgun slightly. The trough is by the corral. Then you may show me these papers. But my children stay inside until I decide you are trustworthy. That is more than fair. As Daniel led his horse to water, he felt her watching his every move. He had come seeking solitude, a place of his own away from complications. Instead, he had found perhaps the most complicated situation imaginable, and on land he had spent nearly every penny purchasing. The night settled around the cabin as Daniel and Zara sat at her rough-hewn table, documents spread between them. The children slept in the loft above, their soft breathing occasionally punctuated by the crackle of the fire. Outside, coyotes called to one another across the darkened plains. It appears, Daniel said carefully, that your husband's claim was never properly recorded with the territorial office. He filed with the local magistrate, but the papers never reached Cheyenne. Zara stared at the documents, her fingers tracing her husband's signature. That cannot be. James rode 3 days to file these papers. He paid the fees. We have the receipt. Daniel nodded. I believe you. But look here, he pointed to his deed. The land office shows this parcel as unclaimed government land when I purchased it 2 months ago. So what happens now? Her voice was quiet but steady. You own our home? The land we have worked for 3 years? The garden that feeds my children? The question hung between them, weighted with implications neither wished to voice. Daniel ran a hand through his dark hair, studying the woman across from him. In the lamplight, the exhaustion in her face was evident, the kind of bone-deep weariness that came not just from physical labor, but from the constant vigilance of protecting her children alone in the wilderness. I do not know, he admitted. This is not what I expected when I purchased the land, and I did not expect to discover that my home legally belongs to a stranger. There was a bitter edge to her words, but also a vulnerability that struck something deep within him. Daniel glanced around the cabin. It was small but meticulously kept. Handmade curtains framed the windows. A shelf held a few precious books. Carved wooden toys sat in a basket near the hearth. Everything spoke of care, of a determination to create home amid hardship. Where is your family? He asked. Do you have relatives nearby? Zara shook her head. James and I came west from Pennsylvania. My parents died before we left. His family disowned him for marrying me. A sad smile flickered across her face. My father was Irish. James's family did not approve. The isolation of her situation struck Daniel forcefully. Miles from the nearest town, a young widow with 2 small children, working land that was apparently not legally hers. The precariousness of her existence was overwhelming. I will sleep in your barn tonight, he said finally. Tomorrow we can ride to Clearwater and speak with Judge Bennett. Perhaps there is a solution that honors both claims. Relief flickered in her eyes, quickly masked. That is reasonable. Thank you. As Daniel gathered his papers, their hands brushed briefly. He felt her start at the contact, then withdraw quickly as though burned. The brief touch left an unexpected warmth in his fingertips. "Mrs. Whitetree," he said as he reached the door, "whatever happens with this land dispute, I want you to know I have no intention of leaving you and your children without a home." She met his gaze steadily. "Mr. Sutton, I have learned that intentions matter far less than actions on the frontier. We shall see what tomorrow brings." The door closed firmly behind him, and Daniel stood for a moment in the cool night air. The stars above were achingly bright against the black canvas of the prairie sky. He had come seeking simplicity, isolation, a place to build a life without the complications of other people. Instead, he had found Zara Whitetree. Morning came with frost rimming the grass and the children's excited voices waking Daniel from his sleep in the hayloft. He emerged from the barn to find the boy, Thomas, watching him with undisguised curiosity from a safe distance. "Mama says you think you own our house," the child said bluntly. Daniel buckled his gun belt, considering how to respond to such directness. "There has been a confusion about the papers. Your mama and I are going to town today to sort it out." The boy frowned. "Are you going to make us leave?" "Because my papa built this house, and he is buried over there." He pointed toward a small rise beyond the corral, where a crude wooden cross stood silhouetted against the morning sky. The simple statement hit Daniel with unexpected force. This was not merely a property dispute. It was the only home these children had ever known, and the final resting place of their father. "I do not want anyone to leave who does not wish to," Daniel said carefully. Zara appeared in the cabin doorway, her golden hair neatly braided and pinned, wearing a faded but clean dress of deep green. "Thomas, come help your sister with breakfast." Her eyes met Daniel's briefly before she disappeared back inside. They rode to Clearwater with the morning sun at their backs, maintaining a careful distance between their horses. Daniel had offered to let Zara ride with him so the children could stay with a neighbor, but she had firmly refused. "Mrs. Gardner from the next homestead is staying with them," she explained. "But I do not leave my children with others if I can help it, especially not when their home is at stake." The journey passed mostly in silence, though Daniel found himself watching her from the corner of his eye. Despite her circumstances, she sat her horse with natural grace, her back straight, her chin lifted against the wind. There was a resilience about her that commanded respect. Clearwater was little more than a cluster of buildings straddling a creek, a general store, a saloon, a small church, and the office of Judge Bennett, who served as both magistrate and land commissioner for the county. The judge, a balding man with shrewd eyes and an impressive mustache, listened to their competing claims, examining both sets of documents with meticulous care. "This is unfortunate," he said finally, removing his spectacles, "but not uncommon. The records system between local magistrates and the territorial office is imperfect." "What does that mean for us?" Zara pressed, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. The judge sighed. "Legally speaking, Mr. Sutton's claim takes precedence. The territorial governor's signature carries more weight than a local filing, especially one that was never properly recorded." Daniel watched the color drain from Zara's face. "However," the judge continued, "there is the matter of improvement to the land. Mrs. Whitetree, you and your late husband built a cabin, dug a well, planted fields and orchards, all improvements that increased the value of the property." "We did," she said quietly. "Everything with our own hands." Judge Bennett turned to Daniel. "Mr. Sutton, while the land is legally yours, you would be required to compensate Mrs. Whitetree for these improvements before taking possession. That could amount to a considerable sum." Daniel nodded slowly, considering the implications. The little money he had left after purchasing the land would hardly cover such compensation. "There is another option," the judge added. "The two of you could come to a private arrangement, perhaps shared ownership or a lease agreement." Zara stood abruptly. "I need air." She turned and walked from the office, the door closing firmly behind her. Daniel found her leaning against a hitching post, her face composed but her eyes betraying her distress. "Mrs. Whitetree, do not offer me charity, Mr. Sutton," she interrupted. "I have managed alone since James died. I will manage now." "It is not charity I am considering," Daniel said carefully, "but a solution that might benefit us both." She turned to face him fully, suspicion evident in her gaze. "And what might that be?" "I know cattle. I know ranching. But I know nothing of building a homestead from scratch." He gestured toward the distant hills where her cabin, his land, lay. You have already done the hardest work. The cabin, the well, the garden. What are you suggesting? Daniel took a breath, scarcely believing what he was about to propose. A partnership. I bring my knowledge of cattle and the capital to expand. You contribute the improved homestead and your knowledge of the land. We share the profits. Zara's eyes narrowed. And my children? Where do they fit in this partnership? They stay in their home. Nothing changes for them. She studied him for a long moment, as though trying to read his true intentions. And what would be expected of me in this arrangement? The implication was clear, and Daniel felt a flush of indignation. Nothing improper, Mrs. Whitetree. I would build a separate cabin for myself nearby. This would be a business arrangement only. Her shoulders relaxed slightly. I will need time to consider your proposal. Of course. Daniel hesitated, then added, whatever you decide, I meant what I said yesterday. I have no intention of forcing you and your children from your home. As they rode back toward the homestead, the silence between them felt different, less hostile, more contemplative. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the rolling landscape, turning the prairie grass to gold. My husband had dreams of running cattle, Zara said suddenly, breaking the hours-long silence. But we never had the means to start a proper herd. Daniel glanced at her, surprised by the voluntary information. It is good land for it. Plenty of water, good grass. He used to talk about building a bigger house, once the ranch was established, with a proper kitchen and bedrooms for the children. A wistful smile touched her lips before fading. Dreams die hard out here. They do, Daniel agreed softly, thinking of his own parents and their failed Kansas homestead. They crested the final rise overlooking the valley, and Zara reined her horse to a stop. From this vantage point, the homestead looked almost impossibly small against the vastness of the Montana landscape. A few structures and fenced areas carved from wilderness through sheer human determination. I accepted long ago that I might never leave this valley, she said quietly. That my children might grow up knowing only this small corner of the world. But at least it was ours. She turned to look at him directly. Now I find even that certainty has been an illusion. Daniel had no ready answer. The frontier made harsh demands, but it seemed particularly cruel to this woman who had already lost so much. Mr. Sutton, Zara continued, before I consider your proposal, I need to understand what kind of man you are. Why did you come here? What were you running from, or toward? The directness of her question caught him off guard. I was not running, he said automatically, then paused. Or perhaps I was. My parents died when I was 17. Since then, I have been a drifter, ranch to ranch, never staying long enough to matter to anyone. And now you want to matter? I want to build something that lasts, he admitted. Something of my own. Zara nodded slowly. That I understand. She nudged her horse forward. Come. The children will be wondering where I am. As they approached the cabin, Daniel noticed Thomas and Elizabeth racing toward them, Mrs. Gardner following at a more sedate pace. The children threw themselves at their mother as soon as she dismounted, chattering excitedly about their day. Daniel watched the reunion with an unexpected tightness in his chest. This was what a home looked like, not just buildings and land, but the people who filled it with life. Have you reached a decision? Mrs. Gardner asked, glancing between them with undisguised curiosity. Zara straightened, her arms still around her children. We are considering a partnership arrangement. The older woman raised her eyebrows. I see. Well, that is practical. It is only a business proposition, Zara added quickly. Mrs. Gardner's knowing smile suggested she had her own thoughts on the matter. Of course, dear. Now, I should head back before dark. Thomas was a perfect gentleman today, and Elizabeth helped me with the mending. After the neighbor departed, an awkward silence fell. Daniel cleared his throat. I should see to my horse, then perhaps make camp by the creek tonight. That is not necessary, Zara said. You may use the barn again. And, she hesitated, you should join us for supper. If we are to be partners, the children should become accustomed to your presence. It was the first tentative step toward acceptance, and Daniel recognized it as such. Thank you. I would be honored. That evening, seated at the small table with Zara and her children, Daniel experienced something he had not felt in years, the simple comfort of a meal shared with others who expected him to return the next day and the day after. It was disconcerting how quickly the sensation of belonging began to chip away at the walls he had built around himself. Mr. Sutton, do you know how to shoot Indians? Thomas asked suddenly, around a mouthful of stew. Thomas, Zara scolded. That is not appropriate conversation. Daniel set down his spoon. I have never shot anyone, Thomas, Indian or otherwise. And I hope I never have reason to. The boy looked disappointed. But Billy Harper said all cowboys fight Indians. Billy Harper has an overactive imagination, Zara muttered. And his father drinks too much whiskey and tells tall tales. Daniel smiled slightly. Being a cowboy is mostly about taking care of cattle. It is hard work, not very exciting most days. Do you have a horse of your own? Elizabeth asked, her small voice piping up for the first time. I do. His name is Buck. Can I ride him sometime? Thomas asked eagerly. Perhaps, Daniel said, glancing at Zara for approval. If your mother agrees, and we start with lessons on a gentler horse first. The conversation continued, Thomas peppering Daniel with questions about cattle and horses, Elizabeth occasionally interjecting with her own inquiries about his travels. It was clear the children were starved for new company, particularly a man's presence. Daniel answered patiently, conscious of Zara's watchful gaze. After the children were tucked into their beds in the loft, Daniel helped Zara clear the table. Their hands occasionally brushed as they worked, each contact sending an unexpected current through him. They need a father figure, she said quietly, breaking the silence. I see how they respond to you. Daniel placed the last plate on the shelf. They are good children. You have done well with them. I have done my best. But there are things I cannot teach them, things a boy should learn from a man. She sighed, leaning against the rough wooden counter. That is part of why I am considering your proposal. Not just for the practical advantages. Her honesty surprised him. I have never been around children much. I would not know where to begin. You did well enough tonight. A small smile tugged at her lips. Thomas is already imagining himself as your cowboy apprentice. Daniel found himself returning her smile, the first moment of genuine warmth between them. He has spirit. That counts for a lot in this country. Too much, sometimes. Her expression grew serious again. If we do this partnership, there must be clear boundaries. For the children's sake as much as ours. They cannot become attached to you only to have you leave when the arrangement no longer suits. The implication stung more than Daniel expected. I am not a man who breaks his word, Mrs. Whitetree. Perhaps not intentionally. But the frontier changes people's plans. I have seen it happen. Daniel studied her face in the lamplight, the wariness in her eyes, the stubborn set of her chin, the quiet dignity that seemed to radiate from her despite her circumstances. She was asking him for a commitment he had never made to anyone since his parents died. I give you my word, he said solemnly, that whatever happens between us, I will consider the welfare of your children in every decision. I will not simply disappear from their lives without explanation. Zara held his gaze for a long moment, as though measuring the truth of his words. Finally, she nodded. Then we have an agreement, Mr. Sutton. A partnership. She extended her hand, and Daniel took it. Her fingers were calloused from work, but surprisingly warm in his grasp. Neither of them seemed in a hurry to let go. Daniel, he said, if we are to be partners, you might as well use my given name. Daniel, she repeated softly, finally withdrawing her hand. And you may call me Zara. As autumn deepened into winter, the partnership began to take shape. Daniel purchased a small herd of cattle with his remaining funds and began construction on a modest cabin 100 yards from Zara's. The arrangement was practical, allowing them to share the work of the homestead while maintaining the propriety necessary for a single woman and man living in close proximity. The first heavy snow came in late November, blanketing the valley in white silence. Daniel awoke to find his half-finished cabin drifted in, the temperature inside barely warmer than the frigid air outside. A knock at his door revealed Thomas, bundled in a woolen coat several sizes too large for him. Mama says you should come to breakfast, the boy announced. And bring your bedroll. She says you will freeze to death out here. Daniel hesitated, aware of the gossip such an arrangement might generate. That is kind of her, but I will be fine. Thomas shrugged. She said you would say that. She also said to tell you that frozen cowboys are of no use to anyone, and that you can sleep by the fire in the main room where everyone can see you are being proper. Daniel suppressed a smile at Zara's foresight. Well, when you put it that way. The cabin was warm and fragrant with the smell of coffee and frying bacon when Daniel entered, stamping snow from his boots. Zara stood at the stove, her back to him, her hair loose around her shoulders in a golden cascade he had never seen before. She turned at his entrance, and he was struck by how young she looked with her hair down, barely more than a girl, really, bearing responsibilities that would crush many grown men. "I see Thomas delivered my message," she said, tucking a strand of hair behind her ears self-consciously. "He did, though I do not want to impose." "It is not an imposition. It is common sense." Zara gestured to the hearth. "You can set up your bedroll there in the evenings. During the day, we can store it in the trunk. Mrs. Gardner has already volunteered to spread word in town that we have made proper arrangements." Daniel nodded, grateful for her practicality. "Thank you. It is only until I can finish my cabin, which will not be until spring, with this snow," she pointed out, turning back to the stove. "We will manage until then." And they did manage, settling into a routine that became surprisingly comfortable. Daniel rose before dawn each day to tend the cattle, returning for breakfast with the family before tackling the day's chores. Zara maintained the cabin and garden stores while teaching the children their lessons. In the evenings, they would gather around the fire, Daniel cleaning his tack or carving small toys for the children, Zara mending clothes or reading aloud from one of her precious books. It was a simple existence, but Daniel found himself more content than he had been in years. The children's presence filled the cabin with life and laughter, and he discovered an unexpected talent for storytelling that delighted them at bedtime. More surprising was his growing awareness of Zara, not just as his business partner or the mother of Thomas and Elizabeth, but as a woman. He noticed the way firelight caught in her hair, the rare sound of her laughter when Elizabeth said something particularly precocious, the quiet strength with which she faced each day's challenges. For her part, Zara seemed to relax gradually in his presence. She began to share stories of her life before Montana, her childhood in Pennsylvania, her courtship with James, their difficult journey west. In turn, Daniel spoke of his own past, breaking the habit of reticence that had defined his adult life. "Why did you never marry?" she asked one evening as they sat by the fire, the children long asleep in the loft above. Outside, a January blizzard howled against the cabin walls. Daniel stared into the flames, considering his answer. "I never stayed in one place long enough to court anyone properly, and I never saw much happiness in the marriages around me growing up. My parents fought constantly. All marriages have difficulties," Zara said quietly. "James and I disagreed about many things, but there was love between us, and that made the hardships bearable. You must miss him very much." Her hands stilled on the shirt she was mending. "I do, not just for myself, but for the children. He was a good father." She looked up, meeting Daniel's gaze. "He would be grateful to you, I think, for helping us keep our home." "It is as much for my benefit as yours," Daniel pointed out. "The partnership makes sense for us both." "Is that all it is? A practical arrangement?" The question hung between them, loaded with implications neither had acknowledged aloud. Daniel found himself unable to maintain the fiction that had become increasingly transparent as the winter progressed. "No," he admitted. "Not anymore." Zara's eyes widened slightly, but she did not look away. "We agreed on boundaries." "We did." Daniel leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "And I have respected them. I will continue to do so." "To what end, Daniel?" Her voice was barely above a whisper. "What future do you see here?" It was a fair question, one he had been asking himself with increasing frequency. His original plan of solitary ranching had evolved into something far more complex, involving not just Zara but her children, who had somehow worked their way into his heart despite his best defenses. "I see a family," he said finally. "If you would consider it. Not now. I know it is too soon. But perhaps someday." Zara's expression softened, a mixture of hope and uncertainty. "The children are already attached to you. If this goes wrong, it will not." Daniel reached across the space between them, his hand covering hers. "I am not asking for promises, Zara. Just possibility." She turned her hand beneath his, their fingers intertwining. "Possibility," she repeated softly. "I can agree to that." The moment was interrupted by a sound from outside, the distant but unmistakable report of a rifle, followed by the panicked lowing of cattle. Daniel was on his feet instantly, reaching for his coat and gun belt. "Something is wrong with the herd." "Wolves?" Zara asked, rising as well. "No." Daniel checked his revolver before holstering it. "That was a rifle shot. Someone is out there." Fear flashed across Zara's face. Rustlers, stay inside. Keep the children quiet. He moved toward the door, then hesitated. If I am not back by dawn, take the children to the gardener's place. Daniel. She caught his arm, her eyes wide with alarm. Be careful. He covered her hand with his own. I will return. I promise. The storm outside was blinding, snow driving horizontally in the howling wind. Daniel forced his way through drifts toward the cattle pen, guided more by memory than sight. As he approached, dark figures materialized through the white curtain, 3 men on horseback, driving several of his cattle before them. Hold there, Daniel shouted, drawing his revolver. One of the figures turned sharply, raising a rifle. Daniel dove into a snowbank as a shot cracked past him. He returned fire, aiming low to avoid hitting the cattle. One of the rustlers cried out, clutching his leg, but remained mounted. Sutton, a voice called through the storm. That you? Daniel froze at the sound of his name. Who wants to know? A harsh laugh answered him. Figured you would end up somewhere like this. Always did talk about having your own spread. Recognition dawned. Carson? Mitch Carson. The figure urged his horse closer, revealing a weathered face Daniel had not seen in over 2 years, a fellow cowhand from a Texas outfit, known for his quick temper and questionable morals. The very same. Times have been hard since the lazy bee let us go. Carson gestured to his companions. We are just helping ourselves to a little compensation. No hard feelings. Daniel kept his revolver trained on Carson's chest. Those are my cattle. Ride away now, and I will forget this happened. Your cattle? Carson's expression darkened. Word in town is you are living with some widow. Those your cattle, or hers? Mine. Purchased legally with my own money. Carson sneered. And the widow? You purchase her too? Must be nice, having a woman cooking your meals and warming your bed. Anger flared in Daniel's chest. You watch your mouth, Carson. Mrs. Whitetree is my business partner and nothing more. Business partner. Carson laughed. That what they call it these days? Daniel cocked his revolver. Right out. Now. Carson's eyes narrowed. Or what? You going to shoot all 3 of us? In the storm? I do not think so. He gestured to his men. Take the rest of the herd. Sutton here is too busy playing house to stop us. Before Daniel could respond, a shotgun blast exploded from behind him. One of Carson's companions yelled as buckshot peppered his horse's flank, sending the animal bucking in panic. Zara stepped up beside Daniel. Her father's shotgun braced against her shoulder, her expression fierce despite the snow plastering her hair to her face. The next shot will not miss, she called out. Leave our cattle and get off our land. Carson's eyes widened at the sight of her. Well now, the widow herself. I will not warn you again, Zara said, pumping the shotgun to chamber another round. Daniel shifted subtly, positioning himself between Carson and Zara. 3 against 2 are not good odds for you. Carson, even with the element of surprise. One of your men is already wounded. How many more casualties are you willing to take for a few head of cattle? A tense silence stretched between them, broken only by the howl of the wind and the nervous shuffling of horses. Finally, Carson spat into the snow. This is not finished, Sutton. It is for tonight, Daniel replied steadily. Right out. With a jerk of his head, Carson signaled to his men, and they disappeared into the storm, leaving the scattered cattle milling in confusion. Daniel lowered his revolver, turning to Zara with a mixture of relief and anger. I told you to stay inside, and let you face 3 armed men alone. She lowered the shotgun, her hands trembling now that the danger had passed. I heard the shots. The children are still asleep. That was Carson, a man I used to ride with in Texas. Bad news. Daniel ran a hand through his snow-covered hair. This is not over. He knows where we are now. Zara's expression hardened. Then we will be ready for him. Looking at her standing defiantly in the snow, shotgun in hand, Daniel was struck by a sudden certainty. This woman, this family, this land, they were worth fighting for. Worth dying for, if necessary. We should get the cattle secured, he said, reaching for her elbow. Then we need to talk. The rustler attack marked a turning point. With the threat of Carson's return hanging over them, Daniel and Zara found themselves making decisions as a unit, the boundaries between partnership and something deeper blurring with each passing day. Daniel moved his bedroll from the main room to a pallet outside the children's loft, positioning himself between the entrance and the family. Each night before sleep, He and Zara would sit at the table, speaking in low voices about plans for the ranch, the children's education, and increasingly, a shared future. "I have been thinking," Daniel said one evening in late February, as they reviewed their supplies for spring planting. "We should formalize our partnership legally." "For protection," Zara looked up from her inventory list. "What sort of formalization do you mean?" Daniel hesitated, then pushed forward. "Marriage would be the simplest solution. It would secure your position on the land and give the children my name for inheritance purposes." Her pencil stilled. "Are you proposing to me as a business arrangement, Daniel Sutton?" "No," he admitted, meeting her gaze, "though it would have many practical advantages. I am proposing because these months with you and the children have shown me what I was missing in all those years of drifting. A home, a family, and if I am not ready—" Her voice was soft, but her eyes were steady on his. "James has been gone only a year." Daniel nodded slowly. "Then we continue as we are? The offer remains open, for whenever you might be ready." Zara set down her pencil and reached across the table to take his hand. "Ask me again in the spring," she said quietly, "when the snow melts and we can see what we have built together in the light of day." It was neither acceptance nor rejection, but something in between, a promise of consideration that Daniel treasured more than an impulsive yes. Spring came late that year, the snow lingering in shadowed hollows well into April. With the thaw came renewed activity, calving season, planting, and the completion of Daniel's cabin, which now served more as a storage space than a dwelling. The threat from Carson had not materialized over the winter months, but Daniel remained vigilant, teaching Zara to shoot his revolver and establishing safety protocols for the children. Thomas thrived under Daniel's tutelage, proudly helping with the cattle and learning to ride Buck under close supervision. Elizabeth, initially shy around Daniel, now demanded bedtime stories each night, climbing into his lap with a book as if she had always belonged there. On a warm May afternoon, Daniel returned from checking fence lines to find Zara standing on the small rise where James was buried. She had placed wildflowers on the grave, her head bowed in silent communion with her late husband. Daniel hesitated, unwilling to intrude on her private moment. But she looked up, sensing his presence, and beckoned him forward. "I was telling him about you," she said as Daniel approached. "About how you have helped us, how you have been good to his children." Daniel removed his hat respectfully. "I hope he would approve." He would. Zara's eyes were clear, without tears. "James wanted us to be safe and cared for. You have ensured that." They stood in silence, the spring breeze rustling the new grass around the grave marker. In the valley below, Thomas and Elizabeth played near the corral, their laughter carrying up the hillside. "It is spring," Zara said finally, turning to face Daniel fully. "It is." He felt suddenly nervous, like a boy rather than a grown man. "You said you would ask me again in the spring." Daniel took a deep breath. "Zara Whitetree, will you marry me? Not for practical reasons, though there are many. Not for the children, though I love them as my own. But for us, because I love you, and I want to build a life with you." Her smile bloomed slowly, like the wildflowers emerging across the prairie. "Yes," she said simply. "I will marry you, Daniel Sutton." He stepped forward, drawing her into his arms for the first time. Her body fit against his as though made to be there, her face tilting up to receive his kiss. It was gentle at first, then deepening with months of unspoken longing. When they finally parted, breathless, Zara laughed softly. "We should tell the children." Hand in hand, they walked down the hillside toward the cabin. Before they reached it, Thomas spotted them and came running, Elizabeth toddling behind. "Is it true?" Thomas demanded, skidding to a stop before them. "Mrs. Gardner said you were going to be our new papa. Is it true, Mr. Sutton?" Daniel exchanged a startled glance with Zara. "News travels fast. Yes, if you and Elizabeth approve, I would like to marry your mother and be a father to you both." Thomas considered this solemnly. "Will we have to call you Papa right away, or can we practice first?" Zara stifled a laugh as Daniel crouched to the boy's level. "You can call me whatever feels right to you, Thomas. There is no hurry." Elizabeth tugged at Daniel's sleeve. "Will you still tell stories?" "Every night," he promised, lifting her into his arms. "And we will make new stories together, all of us." As they walked toward the cabin as a family for the first time, a rider appeared on the horizon. Daniel tensed, instinctively positioning himself between the approaching figure and Zara and the children. "Get inside," he said quietly. Just in case. Daniel, Zara began. Please. She nodded, gathering the children and retreating to the cabin, though she remained watchful in the doorway. As the rider drew closer, Daniel recognized not Carson but Judge Bennett from Clearwater, his horse lathered from hard riding. Sutton, the judge called, reining in his mount. Glad I found you. Judge Bennett. Daniel greeted him, relaxing slightly. What brings you all this way? The older man dismounted stiffly. Information I thought you should have without delay. He glanced toward the cabin, where Zara now stood on the porch. Mrs. Whitetree, good day to you. Judge, she acknowledged. Will you come in for coffee? You look like you have ridden hard. Thank you, ma'am, but this cannot wait. He turned back to Daniel. Mitch Carson was arrested in Billings 3 days ago. He and his gang robbed the bank there, but they were caught before they could get away. Daniel felt a wave of relief. That is welcome news. There is more. The judge's expression grew grave. During questioning, Carson admitted to other crimes, including the theft and destruction of land claim documents from the territorial office in Cheyenne. Daniel went very still. What are you saying? Carson worked briefly as a clerk in the land office 2 years ago. He admitted to destroying several claim records for personal profit, including the Whitetree claim. The judge pulled a document from his coat. This is a certified copy of the original claim, recovered from local records. James Whitetree's claim was valid and filed properly. This land legally belongs to Mrs. Whitetree and her heirs. Zara had moved to Daniel's side, her face a study in shock. You mean, all this time? The land was rightfully yours, Daniel finished quietly. Not mine at all. Judge Bennett handed the document to Zara. The territorial governor has invalidated Mr. Sutton's deed and recognized your prior claim. There will be compensation for the error, of course. Daniel felt oddly hollow, watching Zara clutch the paper that rendered his own claim worthless. Everything he had built here, everything he had come to love, none of it had ever truly been his. Thank you for bringing this news, Judge, Zara said, her voice steadier than Daniel expected. Will you reconsider that coffee? Your horse could use the rest. While the judge watered his horse, Zara pulled Daniel aside, her eyes searching his face. What are you thinking? That I am happy for you, he said honestly. This is justice. And what about us? Our plans. Daniel hesitated. The circumstances have changed, Zara. You do not need my name to secure your claim anymore. The children's inheritance is protected. Understanding dawned in her eyes, followed quickly by anger. Is that what you think? That I agreed to marry you for legal protection? No, but... Daniel Sutton, listen to me carefully. She gripped his arms, her gaze fierce. I said yes because I love you. Because my children love you. Because we want you in our lives, deed or no deed. Does that change for you now that the land is legally mine instead of yours? The question struck at the heart of his deepest insecurity, that he was dispensable, that attachments were temporary, that he would always end up alone. No, he said finally. It changes nothing for me. I love you, Zara. I love Thomas and Elizabeth. The deed was just paper. This, he gestured between them. This is real. Relief softened her features. Then we proceed as planned, though perhaps with a slight amendment to the ceremony. What amendment? A smile tugged at her lips. Instead of you giving me your name and property, perhaps I will be giving you mine. Daniel laughed, drawing her into his arms. Zara Whitetree Sutton has a fine ring to it. I was thinking more of Daniel Whitetree, she teased. Since it is my land, after all. He kissed her then, unconcerned with the judge's presence or propriety. I would take any name to be with you. The wedding took place in June, beneath the cottonwood trees by the creek. Mrs. Gardner had spread the word throughout the county, ensuring a respectable gathering to witness the union. Thomas stood proudly at Daniel's side, appointed ring-bearer with solemn importance. Elizabeth scattered wildflower petals before her mother, her dark curls crowned with daisies. Judge Bennett officiated, his voice carrying across the assembled neighbors and friends as he recounted the unusual circumstances that had brought the couple together. It is not often in this harsh territory that misfortune leads so directly to blessing, he concluded. But here we see how a simple error, a deed sold for land already claimed, has resulted not in conflict but in family. Daniel Sutton came seeking property and found a home. Zara Whitetree sought to defend her land and discovered a partner worthy of her strength. When it came time for vows, Daniel took Zara's hands in his. marveling at how completely his life had changed in less than a year. I, Daniel Sutton, take you, Zara Whitetree, as my lawfully wedded wife. I came west seeking solitude, believing that attachment meant vulnerability, that to survive meant to remain apart from others. You showed me that true strength comes from connection, from family, from love, from building something together that neither of us could create alone. I vow to stand beside you through whatever hardships the frontier brings, to father your children as my own, and to remember each day that the greatest treasure I found was never the land, but the people living upon it. Tears glistened in Zara's eyes as she spoke her own vows. I, Zara Whitetree, take you, Daniel Sutton, as my lawfully wedded husband. When James died, I believed my heart would never heal, that I would spend my days alone, fighting to keep what we had built. You taught me that love is not finite, that the heart expands to embrace new joy without diminishing what came before. I vow to stand with you as equal partners in all things, to create a home filled with love and laughter, and to face whatever challenges come not with fear, but with the certainty that together, we are stronger than either of us alone. As Judge Bennett pronounced them husband and wife, Thomas and Elizabeth cheered loudest of all. Daniel knelt to embrace them before kissing his new wife, understanding that his vows had been to all three, not just to Zara. That evening, after the celebration had ended and the guests had departed, Daniel stood on the porch of what was now truly their home. Zara joined him, slipping her arm around his waist as they gazed out at the land they would cultivate together. "Happy?" she asked softly. Daniel pulled her close, breathing in the scent of wildflowers in her hair. "More than I ever believed possible." In the valley below, their small herd grazed peacefully. The cabin windows glowed with lamplight, reflecting off the new addition Daniel had built for their bedroom. Thomas and Elizabeth slept in the loft, secure in the knowledge that both mother and father would be there when they woke. "I was thinking," Daniel said, "that we might expand the herd next spring. Build a proper ranch, as James had planned." "The Whitetree Sutton Ranch," Zara suggested. "Has a nice sound to it." "It does." Daniel smiled. "A legacy for the children. And perhaps for others," Zara added, her hand drifting to her stomach in a gesture so subtle Daniel almost missed it. He stared at her, hope and wonder blooming in his chest. "Zara, are you saying?" Her smile confirmed what words had not yet spoken. "It seems our partnership has been more productive than anticipated." Daniel laughed, lifting her into his arms and spinning her around on the porch. "Mrs. Sutton, you continue to surprise me." "I plan to do so for many years to come, Mr. Whitetree," she replied, her arms circling his neck. As they stood together on the threshold of their home, the Montana night spread vast and star-filled above them. Daniel thought of the strange twist of fate that had brought him here, a deed purchased sight unseen for land that was not truly for sale, leading him not to the solitary existence he had planned, but to the family he had never known he needed. The cowboy had bought land, finding a widow and her children already living there. But what he had truly found was a home, not in the property itself, but in the hearts of those who dwelled upon it. And in that discovery, Daniel Sutton had finally put down roots that would withstand any storm the frontier might bring.